The brass hinges screamed against the desert silence as Marshal Colt Brennan lifted the weathered lid. Inside, nestled beneath layers of faded silk, lay something that made his weathered hands tremble. 23 years of law enforcement, of staring down the barrel of death itself, and nothing had prepared him for this moment. "I'm weak, don't judge me," she had whispered just minutes before, her voice barely audible over the wind that rattled the shutters of the abandoned homestead. "But we're getting ahead of ourselves." It had started 3 days earlier when Elena Vasquez stumbled into Brennan's office in Copper Falls, her dress torn, her dark hair matted with blood that wasn't entirely her own. She clutched a small brass key in her fist so tightly that her knuckles had gone white as bone. "There's something I need to show you," she'd said, her accent thick with exhaustion and something deeper, shame, perhaps, or fear. "But not here. Too many years in this town." Brennan had seen enough broken souls drift through his office to recognize the look in her eyes. It was the same hollow stare he'd seen in his own reflection after Gettysburg, when the war had carved pieces from his soul that would never grow back. Now, standing in the ruins of the old Mendoza Ranch 15 miles outside town, he watched Elena pace the rotting floorboards like a caged animal. The chest sat between them, an ornate thing, Spanish silver inlaid with turquoise, the kind of treasure that whispered of old Mexico and older sins. "My father," she began, then stopped. Started again. "My father was not the man this town remembers." The key turned easily in the lock, as if it had been waiting all these years for this moment. Elena stepped back, pressing herself against the crumbling adobe wall, her eyes fixed on something far beyond the horizon. "Open it," she whispered, "and then you'll understand why they're coming for me." Brennan's fingers found the lid, and as he lifted it, the dying sunlight caught something that made his breath catch in his throat. But before he could fully process what lay before him, the sound of hoofbeats thundered across the desert floor, at least 6 riders, moving fast and hard toward the homestead. The riders were still a quarter-mile out, but Brennan could already see the glint of steel in their hands. He slammed the chest shut, the brass lock clicking with finality. "Who are they?" he demanded, his hand instinctively moving to the Colt at his hip. Elena's face had gone pale as moonlight. "The Vasquez brothers. My cousins." She pressed her back harder against the wall, as if she could disappear into the adobe itself. "They think I stole their inheritance. Did you?" The question hung between them like smoke from a dying fire. Outside, the hoofbeats grew closer, accompanied now by voices, harsh, demanding voices speaking rapid Spanish that carried the weight of old grudges. Elena looked at the chest, then at Brennan, her dark eyes swimming with unshed tears. "My father left this to me before he died. Said it was my birthright, my protection. But what's inside?" She swallowed hard. "It belongs to more than just me." Brennan could hear individual voices now, could make out words: ladrona, muerte, venganza. Thief. Death. Vengeance. "There's a back way out," Elena said suddenly, nodding toward a gap in the rear wall where the adobe had crumbled away. "Take the chest and go. They won't follow you, you're not family. And leave you here? I'm already dead, Marshal. Has been since the day I opened that chest and learned the truth about my bloodline." She moved toward the gap, then paused. "But what's inside? It could save this whole territory from what's coming. Or destroy it." The riders were close enough now that Brennan could see their faces through the broken windows, hard men with the kind of scars that came from a lifetime of violence. The leader, a man with silver streaking his black beard, raised his hand, and the group slowed to a walk. "Elena!" the man called out in accented English. "We know you're in there, Prima. Come out, and we'll make it quick." Brennan hefted the chest. It was heavier than it looked, the weight of metal and secrets combined. He could make it to the back wall in 3 quick strides, could disappear into the desert with whatever knowledge Elena's father had died protecting. But as he looked at the woman who had trusted him with her darkest secret, he realized he was facing the same choice that had haunted him since the war: save himself, or stand with someone who needed him, even if it meant walking straight into hell. The hoofbeats stopped just outside the front door. 2 minutes, Elena! The voice belonged to the silver-bearded man, and it carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. Then we come in shooting. Brennan set the chest down carefully and drew his Colt, checking the cylinder out of habit more than necessity. He always kept 6 rounds loaded, had since the war taught him that an empty gun was just expensive metal. There's 7 of them, Elena whispered, peering through a crack in the wall. Rodrigo, Miguel, Carlos. She named them like a death roll. All my father's nephews. All raised on stories of gold and glory that was stolen from their bloodline. Is that what's in the chest? Gold? Elena's laugh was bitter as desert wind. Gold would be simpler, Marshal. Gold you can spend, can divide, can forget about. What's in there? She touched her throat, where a thin silver chain caught the last light. It's the kind of wealth that destroys everything it touches. A boot kicked against the front door, testing its strength. The rotted wood groaned but held. My father wasn't just a rancher, Elena continued, her voice barely audible. He was a cartographer for the Mexican government before the war. Before the treaties that carved up this land like a Christmas goose. Another kick, harder this time. Dust rained from the ceiling. He mapped every silver mine, every water source, every pass through the mountains from here to California. Information that would be worth. She gestured helplessly. Worth killing for. Worth dying for. The door splintered. Brennan raised his weapon as the first figure appeared in the doorway, Rodrigo, the silver-bearded leader, his own gun already drawn. Behind him, the shadows of the other riders waited like vultures. Drop the iron, gringo, Rodrigo said calmly. This is family business. The lady asked for protection under territorial law. Brennan replied, his voice steady despite the hammering of his heart. That makes it my business. Rodrigo's smile was cold as winter moonlight. You think your badge means something out here? This land remembers older laws, Marshal. Laws written in blood and blessed by desert spirits your people will never understand. Elena stepped forward, placing herself between the two men. Rodrigo, please. I never wanted any of this. But Papa left it to me, not to you, not to your brothers. There has to be a reason. The reason, said a new voice from the doorway, is that your father was a fool who thought he could change the natural order of things. Miguel Vasquez pushed past his older brother, his face twisted with decades of resentment. In his hand was not a gun, but a knife, the curved blade of a vaquero, honed to razor sharpness and stained with old juice. He promised us shares in whatever treasure he'd hidden. Promised us on his deathbed, with his hand on the cross of our grandmother. Miguel's voice rose with each word. Then we find out he left it all to his bastard daughter. The word hit Elena like a physical blow, and Brennan saw her flinch. That's what this is really about, she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. Not the maps. Not the gold. The shame of acknowledging me. Miguel raised the knife, and in that moment, Brennan realized he was facing something far more dangerous than simple greed. Bastard or not, Brennan said quietly, she's under my protection. The words seemed to hang in the air like the dust motes dancing in the last slanted rays of sunlight. Miguel's grip tightened on the knife handle, but he didn't advance, yet. You know what your protegida really is? Rodrigo asked, his voice soft as silk over steel. Her mother was a puta from the saloons in El Paso. Her father was drunk on mezcal and loneliness when he took her to his bed. Elena's breath caught, but she didn't deny it. And when she died birthing this creature, Miguel spat. Don Carlos tried to make her legitimate. Tried to pretend his moment of weakness deserved the same inheritance as his true nephews. That's enough, Brennan said, but Rodrigo wasn't finished. She grew up in this house, eating food that should have fed our children, sleeping in beds that should have been ours. And now, when justice finally comes calling, she hides behind a gringo lawman. The knife blade caught the dying light as Miguel took a step forward. Open the chest, Elena. Show your protector what kind of woman he's dying for. Elena looked at Brennan, and in her eyes he saw something that reminded him of a wounded animal, not dangerous, just tired of running. Do it, she whispered, Let him see. Brennan kept his gun trained on Rodrigo while he reached for the chest with his free hand. The lock opened with a soft click, and the lid swung up on its protesting hinges. Inside, beneath the silk wrapping, lay not gold or silver, but papers, dozens of them, covered in careful Spanish script and detailed drawings. Maps, as Elena had said, but also something else: land grants, water rights, mining claims. A complete record of every valuable resource in a territory that stretched from the Rio Grande to the Pacific Ocean. But beneath the papers, glinting in the fading light, was something that made Brennan's blood run cold: a collection of silver badges, each one inscribed with a name and a date. Some he recognized: lawmen who had disappeared in the past 5 years, men whose bodies had never been found. "My father wasn't just a cartographer," Elena said softly. "He was a killer. A man who sold information to the highest bidder and murdered anyone who got too close to his secrets." Miguel laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "And now you know, Marshal, why the inheritance belongs to us. We are his true heirs, we who learned at his knee, we who helped him bury the bodies." Rodrigo holstered his weapon and spread his hands in a gesture of mock peace. "The choice is simple, gringo. Walk away, and forget you ever saw this place. Or stay, and we'll add your batch to the collection." Brennan looked from the chest to Elena, saw the shame and fear warring in her eyes. She had known, he realized. Had known exactly what she was inheriting, what blood ran in her veins. But as he watched her standing there, small and afraid but not broken, he thought of all the other broken souls he'd failed to save, all the choices he'd made in the name of survival instead of justice. "The sins of the father," he said quietly, "don't transfer to the daughter." Miguel's smile disappeared. The knife came fast, a silver arc in the dying light, but Brennan was faster. His Colt boomed once, the sound echoing off the adobe walls like thunder, and Miguel crumpled to the floor, the blades spinning away into the shadows. For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then Rodrigo's hand dropped to his gun, and suddenly the small room erupted in violence. Brennan dove behind the chest as bullets began flying, pulling Elena down with him. The ancient wood splintered around them, sending shards into the air like desert rain. He fired twice, heard a cry of pain, then the distinctive sound of men retreating to better cover. "The back wall!" Elena gasped, blood trickling from a cut on her cheek where a wood splinter had grazed her. "We can still." "No!" Brennan's voice was calm, almost peaceful. "I'm tired of running." He stood up, his gun steady in his hand, and walked toward the doorway where Rodrigo waited in the gathering darkness. The older man's shoulder was bloody, but his aim was still true. "You chose poorly, Marshal," Rodrigo said. "Maybe," Brennan replied. "But I chose." The two men faced each other in the dying light, their weapons drawn, and for a moment time seemed suspended like dust in still air. Then Elena stepped between them, her hands empty, her face streaked with tears and blood. "Enough," she said simply. "I renounce it. All of it. The chest, the inheritance, the blood money." She looked at Rodrigo, then at the body of Miguel sprawled on the floor. "Take it. Take everything, and let this end here." Rodrigo's gun wavered. You're giving up your claim?" "I never wanted it," Elena whispered. "I just wanted to know who my father really was. Now I do, and I wish I didn't." She gestured toward the chest with its collection of maps and badges and secrets. "This knowledge, it's poison. It killed my father, killed Miguel, and it'll kill you too if you let it." She turned to Brennan, and in her eyes he saw something he hadn't expected: peace. "But you don't have to let it kill you, Marshal. You can choose differently." Brennan looked at the chest, at Rodrigo, at the woman who had trusted him with her darkest secret. Then, very deliberately, he holstered his weapon and picked up one of the oil lamps that still flickered in the gathering darkness. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "the only way to win is not to play." The lamp hit the chest with a soft crash, and the oil spread across the papers like liquid starlight. The flames caught immediately, consuming maps and land grants and murder weapons with equal hunger. Rodrigo lunged forward, but it was too late. 20 years of secrets and blood money curled into ash in a matter of moments, releasing the ghosts of dead lawmen and murdered witnesses into the desert night. By the time the flames died down, Rodrigo and his remaining men had vanished into the darkness, leaving only hoofprints and the lingering scent of gunpowder. Elena stood in the doorway, silhouetted against the stars, her face turned toward the horizon where the first pale light of dawn was beginning to show. "What happens now?" she asked. Brennan looked at the smoldering remains of the chest, at the badge still pinned to his vest, at the woman who had chosen redemption over revenge. "No," he said. "We go home." They walked out into the desert together, leaving the ghosts of the past to burn in the ruins of the old Mendoza ranch, and for the first time in 23 years, Colt Brennan felt the weight of his badge grow lighter with each step.